The big, shiny chandeliers made the Grand Meridian Hotel's private dining room glow with a warm, golden light. The room was full of long tables polished to a high shine with fancy china, sparkling glasses, and beautiful flower arrangements that smelled like a garden in spring. Tomorrow, 200 very important people from the city will come to this hotel for what my family believed would be the most amazing, most talked about party of the year. I was sitting at the far end of the enormous mahogany table, quietly watching my family. They were laughing, talking loudly, and moving their hands excitedly as they discussed wedding plans, the flowers, the food, and the guest list that read like a list of kings and queens of the city. I couldn't help but smile to myself. It was a little funny, really. None of them knew who really owned all the fancy things around them. The shiny glasses, the crystal chandeliers, the expensive carpet, or even the polished wooden tables. They were proud of it, excited about it, but they didn't know that it wasn't really theirs to celebrate. But before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me where are you watching this from, and what time of day is it? Selena, darling. My Aunt Marigold's voice cut through the chatter. It was soft like silk, but it had a sharp edge too. You've been so quiet tonight. Aren't you excited about tomorrow? Darian's wedding is going to be the talk of the city for months. The whole table turned to look at me. 23 family members, all wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than most people make in a month, were staring. Their faces were a mix of curiosity, judgment, and just a little bit of sneaky condescension. I, on the other hand, was wearing a simple black dress from Target. My hair was pulled back in a plain ponytail. The only jewelry I had was a simple watch that probably came from a department store clearance sale. To them, I was the family disappointment. I was 29 years old, working a normal marketing job, living in a small apartment downtown, and driving a 7-year-old Honda Civic. I bought my clothes at discount stores, and I had never cared much about fancy things. My family noticed all of that. They mostly left me out of the wedding planning. My mom had explained it politely. Selena's situation is very different from ours. Translation: Selena isn't like us, so we don't include her. I'm very happy for Darian and Sarah, I said softly, taking a sip of water while everyone else sipped champagne that probably cost more than my car. Darian, sitting proudly at the head of the table in a custom tuxedo that probably cost more than I earned in a year, leaned back in his chair. He gave me a confident smile, like someone who never had to worry about life at all. I've been meaning to ask, what did you get us for a wedding gift? I know money's tight for you, but Sarah and I are really curious. The question hung in the air like a thick cloud. People at nearby tables seemed to pause for a moment, even if they weren't listening closely to us. Sarah, the bride-to-be, giggled behind her perfectly polished hand. Her huge 5-carat diamond sparkled in the light, catching everyone's attention. Oh, Darian, don't put her on the spot, someone said quietly, trying to be polite. I'm sure Selena did her best with whatever she could afford. My cousin Lennox, fresh out of law school and starting his fancy career at his father's firm, couldn't resist teasing. Come on, Selena. Don't keep us in suspense. Please tell us it's not another one of those homemade photo albums you used to make. Everyone laughed politely, but I could feel that little sting of cruelty in the sound. My mother gave Lennox a warning look, but she was smiling too. Even my dad, usually the calmest and most polite man in the room, was grinning into his brandy glass. Well, I said, setting down my water glass and looking Darian in the eyes, I was thinking of keeping it simple. Maybe just a card like you suggested. There was a pause. Silence filled the room. And then chaos. Darian almost choked on his champagne. A card? Selena? This isn't a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese. This is my wedding. Do you see where we are right now? Look around. The Grand Meridian Hotel. The most exclusive place in the city. Sarah's dad had to call in favors just to get this place. My dad tried to speak. Now, Darian. No, Dad, she needs to hear this, Darian said, louder now, his voice full of pride and self-importance. Selena, you can't just coast through life forever. Look around this table. Uncle Alaric just became a partner at his law firm. Lennox is starting a fancy real estate job. Cousin Sable just got promoted at a big bank. Even little Veda landed an internship at the mayor's office. And tomorrow, Sarah and I will celebrate our marriage with judges, senators, and business owners who control millions of dollars. Sarah's dad owns half the buildings in the city. Her mom sits on the boards of 4 different charities and helps run the symphony orchestra. We've been planning this wedding for 8 months. The flowers alone cost more than most people spend on their entire weddings. We have a 12-piece orchestra, not a DJ. And the cake. It was made by the same pastry chef who did the governor's daughter's wedding last year. And you think, Darian continued, his voice growing even louder, that a card fits into that world? Into our world? I nodded slowly, pretending to think carefully about what he said. You make an excellent point, Darian. A card does seem a little too simple for such a big, fancy occasion. Finally, my Aunt Marigold muttered under her breath, loud enough for everyone to hear. You know what your problem is, Selina? My Uncle Alaric, her husband, who had been drinking a little, leaned back and said, You never learn to think big. You're happy with your little life, little apartment, little job. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but you can't expect to run with the wolves when you're content being a sheep. More polite laughter followed. Even my mom nodded her head in agreement. I pulled out my phone. It was old, 3 years old, and the screen protector had a big crack running across it. To my family, it was just another symbol of my failure. Always on that thing, Lennox said. Who could possibly be calling you at 9:30 on a Friday night? Let me guess, someone from your little marketing company wants to discuss weekend overtime. Actually, I said, standing up, I need to make a call. And you know what? I think you're right, just a card isn't enough. The entire dining room went quiet. Not just our table, but the other tables, too. Even the piano player in the corner stopped playing, as if he sensed something important was happening. I dialed a number I knew by heart and waited while the phone rang. Everyone was staring. Hello, Orion? Yes, I know it's late, but we have a situation at the Grand Meridian that needs immediate attention. No, not dangerous. I need you to cancel the Henderson wedding scheduled for tomorrow. Yes, everything, the ceremony at 3, the cocktail hour at 5, the reception at 7. I don't care about deposits or contracts. Just take care of it. I want you to personally deliver the cancellation notice to the bride's suite tonight. Make sure they understand this isn't a staffing issue or a scheduling conflict. Make it clear it comes directly from ownership. Yes, from Grandstone Hospitality Group. Tell them the owner felt the behavior of the wedding party toward hotel staff was completely unacceptable. Oh, and you can include that detail about inappropriate conduct toward family members as well. Thank you, Orion. I hung up and smiled at the table of horrified faces. I think this is a much more memorable wedding gift than a card, don't you think? My father's voice shook slightly. What did you just do? I sat back down, smoothing my plain black dress. Darian said a card wasn't good enough for the Grand Meridian standards, I said. So, I made sure they wouldn't have to worry about meeting those standards anymore. Sarah jumped up so fast that her chair fell backward with a loud crash, echoing across the silent room. You can't cancel our wedding. You can't just call some random hotel employee. Hotel employee? I asked, pretending to be confused, tilting my head like I didn't understand. Orion isn't just a hotel employee. He works for the owners of this hotel. And now he's made sure the wedding is cancelled. Everyone at the table was staring. Darian's face turned red with anger, his jaw tight. His hands shook a little as he gripped the table. Sarah's mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. My Uncle Alaric dropped his fork. My Aunt Marigold's eyes widened, and even Lennox looked like he had seen a ghost. My mom whispered, Selina, what are you thinking? I smiled calmly. I'm thinking this is exactly the gift you asked for. You wanted to make sure the Grand Meridian standards were perfect. Well, now you won't have to worry about them at all. The piano player, who had been holding a note, finally let it fade. The other guests around the room were staring, whispering to each other. The fancy crystal glasses reflected the bright lights, and even the expensive flowers seemed to lean in as if curious about what I had done. Darian tried to speak, but no words came out. Sarah stood frozen, her diamond ring catching every light in the room, sparkling like a tiny sun. My family looked at me with a mixture of awe, fear, and disbelief. I leaned back in my chair and sipped my water, just like I had at the beginning of the night. My phone sat quietly in front of me, cracked and old, and yet it had just held more power than any of their fancy champagne or expensive clothes. Finally, Darian managed to whisper, You can't do that. Oh, I can, I said, smiling. And I just did. The room was silent, except for the faint clinking of silverware from the other tables, where guests whispered to each other, trying to figure out what had just happened. My family's faces were pale, and some were leaning back in their chairs, still processing that I had canceled the wedding. I sat there quietly watching. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had been so proud of the wealth, the luxury, the glittering wedding plans, and they didn't even know who really owned the place. They didn't know who really had the power. And for the first time that evening, I felt a quiet, warm satisfaction as I watched them struggle to comprehend what had just happened. "Oh, Sarah, I think there's been a mistake," I said slowly. "Orion Hale isn't a worker at the hotel. He's the boss, the CEO of Grandstone Hospitality Group." "Grandstone?" Uncle Alaric's voice got quieter and quieter as he tried to understand. "Yes," I said patiently. "They own this hotel and 17 other fancy hotels in 3 different states. They also own 2 beautiful resorts in the Caribbean and a castle in France that I really like. You might even know some of their hotels already. There's the Grandstone Plaza downtown, the Meridian Resort where you went on vacation last summer, and the Ocean View Conference Center where your law firm has its big meetings every year." For a moment, no one said a word. The room was so quiet that you could hear the soft humming of the air conditioner and the distant sound of cars on the street below. "That's impossible," Aunt Marigold finally whispered. "You work at a marketing company. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive that old car." "I own a marketing company," I said calmly. "It's called Phoenix Digital Solutions. We help hotels, fancy brands, and real estate companies with their online advertising and marketing. About 60% of the big hotels in North America are our clients. That's how I met Orion Hale 5 years ago." I took a sip of water, enjoying the looks on their faces. Shock, disbelief, confusion. It was almost funny. "Orion liked the work we did," I continued. "We helped Grandstone get 340% more bookings directly on their websites in our first year. Later, when they were looking for investors, Orion offered me a chance to buy part of the company. I liked their vision for luxury hotels, so I bought a controlling stake. That's 63% of the company." Darian's mouth moved like a fish out of water. He didn't know what to say. "And about the tiny apartment," I said casually. "It's actually not tiny. It's a 12-story office building in the financial district. Phoenix Digital Solutions uses floors 3 through 8. I live in the penthouse. It's about 4,500 square feet. Big enough, right? Though I suppose it might look small compared to some other homes you've seen." My mother shook her head, so hard it looked like she might fall over. "This is crazy. You can't own a hotel chain. Look at your clothes. Look at your car," Sarah said. "You're right," I said. "I like my clothes because they're comfortable and practical. And the car? Well, that Honda Civic belongs to my assistant, Kala. She lets me borrow it when I visit family. I like to keep a low profile. It helps me see who people really are when they think I don't have anything to offer them." At that moment, Orion Hale himself appeared at our table. It was like he had appeared out of nowhere. He looked perfect in his evening suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, and he walked with confidence and authority. "Ms. Martinez," he said with a slight bow, "I came personally to make sure everything is handled according to your instructions. The Henderson wedding has been completely canceled. All vendors have been notified, and all deposits will be returned by Monday morning. I've also prepared a system to tell all the guests. Shall I start the automated calls and emails?" "Yes, Orion," I said. "Make sure everyone understands the cancellation came from the owners because of inappropriate behavior towards the staff and other guests." "Of course. Also, shall I prepare the Ocean View Ballroom for your corporate event tomorrow? You mentioned wanting to host something for your West Coast marketing clients flying in for the quarterly review," Orion asked. "Perfect. Make sure the catering matches the seasonal menu we discussed, and double-check the AV equipment for the presentation." "Already done, Ms. Martinez. Anything else?" "Yes. Please give these ladies and gentlemen a free dinner tonight. Call it a cancellation courtesy," I said. "By pleasure. Have a wonderful evening," Orion said with another bow and walked away. I turned back to my family. 23 faces stared at me, each in shock, disbelief, and anger. Darian looked like he might throw up. Sarah was frantically texting, probably trying to reach her father. My parents just sat there, finally realizing that their disappointing daughter had more power than they ever imagined. "You see," I said casually, "when you build a business from the ground up, you learn the value of staying humble. I started Phoenix Digital in that tiny studio apartment above a coffee shop that I rented for $800 a month. I could see some of you trying to do the math in your heads. How does someone go from a tiny studio apartment to owning a hotel chain in a few years?" I smiled slightly and continued. "I worked 18-hour days, ate ramen noodles, and whatever free food I could get from networking events. I wore the same 3 outfits to every client meeting for 2 years because I was reinvesting every penny back into the business. But I learned something very important. Success isn't about what you show off to other people. It's about what you build when no one is watching. Selena's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know. How could we have known? You never said anything about. About what? I asked. About Phoenix Digital going public 18 months ago, about it being worth $1.20 billion, about being on Forbes 30 Under 30 for 3 years, about speaking at Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. The words hit them like a punch. Some of them actually flinched. You could have asked, I said. You could have cared about my life beyond joking about my clothes, my car, or my supposed failure. You could have treated me like family instead of a charity case. Suddenly, Sarah grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my skin. Wait! You can't do this. This is my wedding. My dad will destroy you. He owns Patterson Commercial Real Estate. He has connections all over this city. I gently removed her hand. Patterson Commercial? How interesting. That's the company that managed my first office building before I bought my own. When I looked into their work, I discovered they were charging too much for poor service. Broken elevators, heating that didn't work, and security problems. When my lease ended, I bought my own building. I also mentioned to a few other business owners that they might want to explore their options. Her face went from red with anger to pale as ash in a heartbeat. You're lying, Sarah whispered. No, I said calmly. Patterson Commercial lost about 40% of their big tenants over the past 2 years, including the management contract for several Grandstone properties. They were billing us for services they didn't provide. Orion was quite upset when our audit revealed the discrepancies. The color drained completely from Sarah's face. My father finally found his voice. Selena, sweetie, surely we can work this out. Darian didn't mean anything by what he said. We're family. You can't just cancel a wedding over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated. Dad, this isn't about one comment at one dinner. This is about 29 years of being treated like family disappointment. This is about being excluded from family decisions because you assumed I had nothing valuable to contribute. This is about being mocked and dismissed and patronized at every family gathering for the past decade. But we didn't know, my mother protested. If I had told you about my success, would it have mattered? I asked. Should your respect for me depend on how much money I have in the bank? Should the way you treat your daughter be contingent on her net worth? The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and everyone knew the answer. Lennox, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. But the wedding, Selena. There are 200 guests coming tomorrow, senators, judges, business leaders. This will humiliate our entire family. Will it? I asked calmly. Or will it teach you something about consequences, about how you treat people when you think they can't fight back? Darian suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You know what? Fine. You want to play power games? You want to show off your money? Go ahead, cancel the wedding. But don't pretend this is about respect or family values. You're getting revenge because we didn't treat you like the secret billionaire you apparently are. I'm worth $3.7 billion, I corrected quietly. The number landed like a bomb in the middle of the table. Even the servers who had been quietly clearing dishes stopped moving. What? Sarah breathed. Phoenix Digital was just the beginning. I continued, my voice steady. When I started my company, no one believed in me. I worked hard every single day. I didn't care about showing off or wearing fancy clothes. I didn't care about driving an expensive car. I cared about building something real. I cared about showing the world that I could do it. And I did. My parents, Darian, Sarah, and the rest of the family were frozen. Their mouths were opening and closing, trying to form words, but nothing came out. I could see them thinking about every time they had laughed at me, dismissed me, or assumed I would never amount to anything. I leaned back in my chair and looked at them all. Success isn't about what you show off. It's about what you do when nobody's watching. And for 29 years you didn't watch. You didn't see. You didn't care. Well, now you're seeing. And now you're learning. Sarah suddenly looked panicked. But my wedding. Your wedding? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Your wedding is just one night. My entire life has been about building something meaningful. This is about showing you what happens when people assume you can't fight back. When people think you have nothing to offer, and they treat you like a disappointment. She went pale, and her phone slipped from her hand. My father leaned back in his chair, defeated. Darian looked angry but also afraid. Everyone realized that the quiet, unassuming daughter they thought they knew had more power in one finger than they had ever dreamed. I smiled faintly. You could have asked. You could have shown interest. But instead you judged me by the clothes I wore, the car I drove, and your assumptions about what I could or couldn't do. Now you see the truth. And the truth is very clear. Everyone was silent. Not one person said a word. They couldn't. The truth had landed like a weight on the table. I leaned forward slightly. Orion Hale has already taken care of everything. The wedding is cancelled. Your guests are informed. The Ocean View Ballroom is ready for my work event. Everyone is happy. The vendors are happy. And the staff at the hotel? They are safe and respected, just like they deserve to be. You see, when you build something real, people respect you for it. Not because of titles or money, but because of integrity and action. I could see them digesting every word. Pride, anger, shame, it was all there. But above all, they finally understood. I was not the girl they had thought I was. I was someone they had underestimated for too long. And for the first time in 29 years, they understood what it truly meant to underestimate me. The IPO gave me a lot of money, enough to grow my business into many new areas. I started doing real estate projects, investing in renewable energy, and even helping small tech companies get started. Buying the hotel had actually been one of my smaller investments. Last month, Forbes guessed that I had $3.7 billion. I know their guesses are usually lower than reality. My Aunt Marigold made a sound that was like a balloon popping when she heard that. $1 billion. With AB. The funny thing is, even with all that money, I was still standing up at the dinner table, picking up my old, cheap purse. I had actually planned to give my family a very generous wedding gift. I had arranged a month-long honeymoon in Europe. There was my villa in Tuscany, my apartment in Paris, and even a yacht that we could charter in the Mediterranean. I thought it would be a wonderful surprise for them. You have a villa in Tuscany? My mother whispered in disbelief. 3 villas, actually, I said proudly. One in Tuscany, one in the Cotswolds, and another one somewhere else. But the Tuscany villa has the best views of the vineyard. Or, well, it did have the best views for your honeymoon. I was thinking of using it for a corporate retreat now instead. My marketing team has been working really hard lately, and they deserve a nice getaway. Sarah, my cousin, suddenly burst into tears. Her carefully done makeup ran down her cheeks in black streaks. This isn't fair, she cried. You can't punish us just because we didn't know you were rich. How were we supposed to know? I shook my head slowly. I'm not punishing you for not knowing I was rich, I said, swinging my cheap purse over my shoulder. I'm punishing you for treating me badly when you thought I was poor. That is very different. You treated me like I had no value, like I was invisible, just because you assumed I had nothing. That is what I cannot forgive easily. Darian, my brother, grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. Selena, please. I'm sorry. We're all sorry. Can't we just start over? Forget this night ever happened. I looked around at their faces. These were the people who had made me feel small for many years. They had made me feel unwanted, unsuccessful, and insignificant. They had mocked my lifestyle, ignored my ideas, and laughed at my choices. They assumed I had nothing important to contribute to the family. You want to start over? I asked. Here's how we start over. Tomorrow, instead of having your wedding at a fancy hotel, all of you are going to volunteer at the Haven House homeless shelter on 5th Street. A homeless shelter? Aunt Marigold's face went pale. She looked like I had suggested they spend every Saturday digging in a sewer. Yes. You will serve meals, clean bathrooms, sort donations, and listen to the stories of people who have nothing but still treat each other kindly. People who know that a person's worth isn't about their money, their car, or the clothes they wear. Darian frowned. And if we refuse? I smiled. Then you refuse. But if you do, I will never speak to you again. No family dinners, no holidays, no graduations, no birthdays, no weddings. You'll be strangers to me. And since I now own large parts of the city's hotels and real estate, that might make life a little difficult for you in social and business situations. The weight of my words made the whole room silent. Even though they had been mean to me for years, I was still their daughter, niece, sister, and cousin. And now, I was the only one with real power in the areas they cared about. 6 months at the shelter, my father said slowly, his voice controlled. And then what happens? Then we see if you have learned how to treat people with respect, I said. No matter what car they drive, what clothes they wear, or what job they have. We see if you care about family more than social status. Sarah wiped her eyes, smearing her makeup even more. But what about our wedding? We can't just not get married. We already sent out invitations, made plans, and bought dresses. How can we cancel it? You can still get married, I said. Just not at my hotel. You can find a small, simple chapel instead. A place that is more appropriate for people who are learning humility. Something simple and meaningful, instead of grand and showy. A chapel. Sarah looked horrified. There's a lovely little place called St. Mary's just 10 minutes from here. Very small and intimate. Perfect for maybe 20 or 30 of your closest family and friends, instead of 200 people who just want to be seen. 20 or 30? Darian looked like he might faint. Yes, I said. I think most of the original guests were more interested in being noticed at a social event than in actually celebrating your marriage. I started walking toward the door, my cheap shoes making no sound on the soft carpet. Behind me, I could hear Sarah crying even harder, and Darian making frantic calls trying to find another big venue for their wedding the next day. Selena, my mother called as I reached the door. This isn't you. You're not cruel. You've always been the kind one. I turned back one last time. You're right, Mom. The old Selena, the one who let you walk all over her because she wanted your approval, wasn't cruel. But she also wasn't respected. She was treated like a doormat because she was afraid to stand up for herself. This is who I really am now. Strong. Capable. And I will not let anyone treat me like I'm worthless again. Darian followed me to the door, his face red with anger and embarrassment. Some vindictive billionaire destroying lives for fun, he said. No, Darian. This is who you made me become, I said firmly. You wanted to know what I was really worth, what I could really do. Well, now you know. I walked out of the Grand Meridian Hotel, my hotel, into the cool night air. The valet, recognizing me despite my modest appearance, had already brought around my real car. A midnight blue Bentley Continental that cost more than most people's houses. I drove through the city, ignoring all the frantic calls and texts from family members. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting indeed. 6 months later, I got my answer. They all showed up at Haven House that first Saturday. At first, they were miserable. They were dressed inappropriately, clearly uncomfortable, and very unhappy. But over the 26 weeks, something amazing happened. They started talking to the people they were helping. They listened to stories about families who had lost everything to medical bills, veterans struggling with PTSD, and single mothers working 3 jobs just to afford rent. They began to understand the struggles of people who had nothing, but still treated each other with kindness and respect. My father surprised me the most. The proud businessman, who had always looked down on charity work, became one of the most dedicated volunteers at Haven House. He even started a job training program to help homeless people find employment, using his business connections. He hired 2 former residents at his company, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Darian and Sarah did get married, but it was at St. Mary's Chapel, just as I had suggested. Only 28 guests attended instead of 200, and the reception was simple, held in the church hall. Sarah later told me that it was the most meaningful day of her life. The day was about love and family, not about social status or networking. At our first family dinner in over a year, held at Haven House and not at a fancy restaurant, Darian came up quietly as we served meals to families. Selena, I need to apologize, he said. Not just for that night at the hotel, but for years of treating you like you didn't matter. I was so focused on what success looked like, I forgot to see what it really is. And what is it? I asked, ladling soup into bowls. It's making a difference, he said. It's building something that matters. Treating people well because they are human, not because of what they can do for you. He paused, watching a homeless veteran teach my cousin Lennox how to organize the food pantry. You were successful all along. We were just too blind to see it. I smiled at my brother. Really smiled for the first time in many years. The villa in Tuscany is still available, I said. If you want to take a belated honeymoon, consider it a gift. Better late than never. As we cleaned up after the evening meal service, watching families with very little share what little they had with gratitude, I realized something important. I had thought I was teaching my family about respect and consequences, but they had taught me something too. Real success isn't about money, big businesses, or having power over others. Real success is about helping people, lifting them up, and treating everyone with kindness, no matter who they are. I looked around at my family and at the people at Haven House. I saw smiles, gratitude, and real joy. I realized that using whatever advantages I had to help others was far more meaningful than showing off wealth or power. And in that moment, I understood what it truly means to be successful, to be happy, and to be human. Even the small things, the way a mother hugged her children, the way a veteran thanked someone for listening, the way my father taught people to organize the pantry, showed me that respect and kindness were worth more than anything money could buy. My family had learned something valuable too. They began to understand that a person's worth is not measured by their bank account, their clothes, or their car. It is measured by their heart, their actions, and their ability to care for others. For the first time in many years, I felt proud of my family. They had learned humility, empathy, and compassion. They had changed, and so had I. And as I looked out over the simple, joyful scene at Haven House, I knew that real success is about lifting people up, sharing what you have, and making the world a better place for everyone. And so life went on. The villa in Tuscany waited for the belated honeymoon. The apartments and yachts remained part of my life. But what mattered most was the joy and growth I saw in my family and the people I helped. I understood that no matter how much money someone has, it is kindness, respect, and love that make a person truly rich.